On this Independence Day, we celebrate the freedoms we enjoy as American citizens, freedoms enshrined in the founding documents of our nation. And as we've seen with several recent Supreme Court decisions, the current makeup of the Supreme Court represents a majority, albeit ever so slim, of justices with perhaps an adherence to constitutional originalism that we have not seen on the court in nearly a century. We saw this not only in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision overturning Roe v. Wade, but also recent decisions favoring both religious freedom and reaffirming the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Mike Johnson. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, the House Armed Services Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of my home state of Louisiana, and he is a constitutional attorney. Mike, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you, especially on Independence Day.
Yeah, happy 4th of July to you. It's I think, especially appropriate to remember the founding of our nation and the intent of the founding fathers when writing and ratifying the Constitution. And I think when we see what just happened recently, we're reminded of the importance of the Constitution and why, as conservatives, we defend the adherence to that Constitution.
Well, that's exactly right. And, you know, we say all the time, it's often said elections have consequences. They certainly do. We now have what amounts to a supermajority on the United States Supreme Court. Of those 9 justices, you have 6 now who, at least in this term, are voting pretty faithfully towards that principle of originalism that you just outlined there. What does that mean? It's a fancy word that just simply means we expect judges, and our constitutional system relies upon the idea that federal judges will faithfully interpret and apply the Constitution as it's written. They'll be faithful to the text. They won't use the document and regard it as the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, a living and breathing document. They won't look into the text of the Constitution and invent rights that are not listed there. But that's what the jurisprudence of the court had done for several decades. And now it appears, Tony, especially in light of these decisions over the last couple of weeks, that we are getting back to the original intent of the Constitution, and it is a long time coming.
You know, what I find very instructive in this is, we have talked for years. I've been in I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. I've been in the pro-life movement for 30 years. You and I have been friends for 25, I think, since you were in law school. And, the left has relied upon a liberal activist court to do their work. Now, with these court decisions, all of a sudden, they're rediscovering how our system works. I want to play this clip of the president this past week as the NATO summit was wrapping up. He had these comments to say about the recent court decisions. Play that clip of President Biden.
The most important thing to be clear about is we have to change. I believe we have to codify Roe v. Wade in the law. And the way to do that is to make sure the Congress votes to do that. And if the filibuster gets in the way, it's like voting rights. It should be, we provide an exception for this, require an exception to the filibuster.
Now, admission there that Roe v. Wade was not the law of the land. It was imposed upon us by the court. And so now they want to talk, and of course they've been talking about this since he took over. They want to codify it, they want to actually pass a law, but they can't do that either because they can't get enough members of Congress, or that the Senate in this case, to agree with them. And so they want to change the rules over there.
Yeah, that's a really important point. There's so much to unpack about that clip. Of course, Joe Biden has done a fantastical flip-flop on this issue, and even the issue of breaking the filibuster itself. There's a reason that the Democrats have never codified Roe v. Wade, even when they had big majorities in both houses and they had the White House as well. And that's because their position is far too radical for the American people. What the court did in the Dobbs opinion is what we had been waiting on for a half century, Tony. As you mentioned, we've been working for that for a long, long time, to simply have a majority of the court acknowledge the plain truth. The right to abortion is nowhere in the Constitution, as they've now pointed out clearly. It's not in the text or the structure or the meaning of the document. And so when the court made that errant ruling in 1973 in Roe, they invented the right to abortion out of thin air. Effectively, they got a majority on the Supreme Court to act like a legislature and impose this consequential policy on the American people. And the result, as we know, is more than 63 million American children were not allowed to be born. I mean, it's just an unspeakable tragedy. So we've gotten that reverse. So what do the Democrats do? What do the radical leftists in charge of the government now do? They immediately want to go back and put that into the law. They don't have the votes to do it. They dare not break the filibuster for this, because that would be a Pandora's box that we could never close again. But the translation to what the president said there for everybody following at home is, oh, you know what? This time the court gave us an opinion that we don't agree with. And so now we want to burn the institutions to the ground to enforce our unpopular policy on the country.
You know, Mike, I can always tell how significant something is by those on the other side and how they react. And it's been over the top in terms of the reaction from the left, that's the Democratic Party. When you read the opinion, this really goes to the heart of where we got off track in this country, where the court, not only abortion, but it began to create these rights out of thin air. In the shadows of the Constitution, they found all of these things. And what gives me hope is that in reading Alito's opinion, he's writing for the majority, is that this court is returning us to the Constitution, which has staying power.
Absolutely. 246 years is our birthday. That's how old we are as a nation. And, Tony, when I speak to college students and high school students, as you often do to young people, you say 245, 246 years to them, that seems like an eternity. But you and I both recognize, and your listeners and viewers know, that's really a short span of time on the scale of human history. We don't know how long this grand experiment in self-governance can last. The founders were very clear with their admonitions on how to keep this constitutional republic. But one of the things that is critical to ensuring that we have future birthdays as a nation, that we maintain the republic, is that we maintain and uphold that Constitution with its separation of powers, with its checks and balances, with its three distinct branches of government. And the court has a limited role. The legislature has a role. The executive has a role. And what's happened in recent decades, Tony, is that many of those lines have been obscured. The executive branch is doing more than it's supposed to because it's usurped authority from the legislative branch, because members of Congress don't want to take tough votes. So they're happy to let administrative agencies run amok and make law themselves. And meanwhile, activist courts have been making law as well. They've usurped authority from the legislative branch, and they've been imposing their will upon the people, as we noted, with hugely consequential effects. And so now, finally, we're getting a realignment. We have apparently now at least 5 and probably 6 justices on the court who are committed to going back to that original intent of the Constitution, to saying that, look, the role of the court is not to make law. By the way, the role of administrative agencies is not to make law either. That's right. One of the most recent cases. This is a very, very good development and a healthy thing for us to be able to preserve this republic and enjoy Independence Day celebrations going forward.
Yeah, we don't have time to unpack this because we've got about a minute left in this segment. But I used to teach this course, God and Government. You've picked it up and you're teaching it now. And one of the discussions was on change in a society, the superstructure, substructure. I mean, this is significant change. We can expect some rocky days ahead as the court has returned. I mean, this is like a hard right turn, moving back to the Constitution. And so we need to be prepared for some things ahead.
Yeah, it's going to be rocky. You'll see unrest. You'll see calls for radical things from Washington to the state houses and all the way down. But we have to hold the line, and we have to do what is right and correct, and what follows the text of the Constitution. It has served us very well for 246 years now, and we deviate from that at our peril. Yeah. I'm grateful that we have conservatives on the court willing to do the right thing, and by right we mean the correct thing. Right. And let's hold the line and stand for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Johnson, always great to see you, my friend. Happy 4th of July to you and the family.
You too. Thanks, Tony.